What if AI could read the market for you? What if one command could pull technicals, fundamentals, news, market structure, and multiple timeframes together? And what if Claude Code could turn all of that raw TradingView data into a clear trading research workflow in seconds? That is exactly what we're testing today. Instead of manually opening charts, checking RSI and MACD, searching financial news, looking at earnings dates, comparing timeframes, and finding support and resistance one by one, we're going to connect Claude directly with TradingView data and see how powerful this combination can become. You enter the stock symbol, and Claude can research, organize, compare, and explain the available market data for you. And in this tutorial, we're going to build the complete workflow in 6 steps. Step 1, connect TradingView Remix with Claude. Step 2, explore the market data tools Claude can access. Step 3, run technical and multi-timeframe analysis. Step 4, add news, earnings, macro events, and fundamentals. Step 5, install TradingView workflows inside Claude Code. Step 6, run ready-made commands for Confluence, levels, market structure, and complete chart analysis. So by the end, we're essentially turning Claude Code plus TradingView into one AI-powered market research system, while still verifying the important signals ourselves. So now starts with one simple thing: connecting TradingView to Claude. First, open your browser and go to TradingView Remix. This is the bridge we're going to use to bring TradingView market data and analysis tools directly inside Claude. On the home page, you can see that it describes itself as a AI chart copilot for TradingView, and at the moment, it's available in public beta. Before connecting anything, let me quickly show you what we actually get here. The important part is that this isn't limited to simply asking for a stock price. It can work with technical indicators, fundamentals, market structure, scanners, news, economic calendars, options data, and several other TradingView-related tools. And because we're going to connect this with Claude, we can interact with all of that using normal language instead of manually opening 10 different pages and checking every indicator one by one. If I scroll further down, you can also see the available plans and what's included. For this tutorial, I'm mainly interested in testing the actual integration and seeing how much useful market analysis Claude can perform through it. Another useful thing here is that there are different ways to connect. You can use OAuth, an API key in supported setups, and there are also ready-made workflows for different AI clients. For what I'm doing in this video, we're going to start by connecting it directly with Claude. On the TradingView Remix setup page, go to the Connection section and select the option for Claude. Here it gives us the connection information we need. Now open Claude, go into Settings, and then open Connectors. Click Add, and choose the option to add a custom connector. I'm going to give this connector a simple name like TradingView, and then paste the connector URL provided by TradingView Remix. For authentication, I'm using the recommended authorization method shown here, so Claude can request access through the browser instead of me manually moving credentials around. Once everything is entered, click Add. Claude will now recognize the connector, but we still need to authorize it before it can start accessing the tools. So I'm going to continue with the connection process. As soon as I connect it, the browser opens the authorization page. I'm going to approve the connection here. And now you can see the confirmation. Connected. That's basically the important part. I'll return to Claude, and inside the connectors section, you can now see TradingView listed with the other available connectors. So from this point forward, Claude can call the TradingView tools whenever they are relevant to our prompt. And the best part is that we don't have to manually select a different API every time. Before running the first test, look at all the different categories available here. The first one is quotes and fundamentals. This can give Claude things like real-time snapshot pricing, valuation information, financial metrics, analyst price targets, and company-related data. Then we have technicals. This is one of the most interesting parts for trading because it includes indicators such as RSI, MACD, moving averages, Bollinger Bands, aggregated technical ratings, and multiple time frame analysis. Then we have bars and market structure. This can work with historical OHLCV data and analyze things like market structure, order blocks, fair value gaps, swing structure, and other price action information. Next is screener and scanning. So instead of manually searching through hundreds of symbols, we can potentially ask Claude to help filter or compare instruments based on specific conditions. Then we have news and calendars. This includes company news, macroeconomic events, earnings dates, and dividend-related information. There are also options-related tools, web-based research capabilities, and, depending on how the account is connected, portfolio and TradingView account-related features. So rather than just saying, what's Apple's price, we can combine technical analysis, fundamentals, news, market structure, and multiple timeframes inside one AI workflow. Let's test that first with technical analysis. The prompt is asking for per-interval indicators, including RSI, MACD, moving averages, and Bollinger Bands, aggregated buy and sell ratings, plus multi-timeframe trend alignment with a Confluence score. I'll copy this idea, move back into Claude, and send it. And I'm going to test it with Apple. Now, watch what happens. Instead of Claude simply generating an answer from its own general knowledge, it starts calling the connected TradingView tools. It first needs to identify the correct ticker and retrieve the latest technical information. Then it checks the relevant indicators. After that, it analyzes the different timeframes and starts combining the information into one response. This is where the integration becomes much more interesting than just asking a normal chatbot about a stock, because the answer can be built from the actual market data tools available through the connector. Let's wait for the full analysis. And here is the result. Claude has now created a complete technical snapshot for Apple. At the top, we have the current market information, and then it starts breaking the analysis down indicator by indicator. You can see the RSI, the MACD, stochastic readings, CCI, ADX, momentum, ATR, Bollinger information, and moving averages. But the part I like much more is further down. Instead of looking at only one time frame, Claude creates a multi-timeframe alignment table. So we can compare the shorter time frames with the 4-hour, daily, weekly, and monthly readings. And this is important because one of the biggest mistakes when looking at a chart is seeing a bullish signal on one time frame and assuming the entire market structure is bullish. Here, Claude is showing that different time frames can tell completely different stories. For example, one time frame may have bearish momentum, while a higher time frame is still structurally stronger. Claude then summarizes all of this as a confluence view, instead of pretending that one indicator gives a perfect buy or sell signal. That's exactly how I would use AI here, not to blindly tell me what trade to take, but to compress a large amount of market information into something I can inspect much faster. And you can also see that Claude itself gives context around the conflicting signals rather than presenting the output as a guaranteed financial advice. Now let's add another completely different layer: news and upcoming events. Back on the website, I'm going to select News and Calendars. This example asks for full symbol-related news, the macroeconomic calendar with importance filtering, and upcoming earnings and dividend dates. Again, I'm going to use Apple. I'll send that request into the same Claude conversation. Now, Claude already knows which TradingView connector we're using, so it can begin retrieving the required information. So let's see whether Claude can combine those event risks into the research workflow as well. Now we have the result. Claude first gives us recent Apple-related news and summarizes what those stories could mean from a market perspective. Instead of opening different news sites manually, I can get the relevant stories collected in one place and then decide which ones deserve deeper research. Below that, Claude gives us upcoming company events. We can see items such as the next earnings date, previous earnings information, and other available company calendar data. And then we get the macro calendar. This is very useful because now Claude can tell us which high-impact economic releases are coming up and when they are scheduled. So if I'm researching a trade around a particular date, I can immediately see whether something like inflation data, employment numbers, GDP, an FOMC-related event, or another important release is sitting directly in front of it. Again, this isn't predicting what the market will do. What it's doing is reducing the amount of manual research. Instead of opening a technical chart, a news site, an earnings calendar, and an economic calendar separately, Claude can bring those layers together inside one conversation. Next, let's test the fundamental side. I'll go back and select quotes and fundamentals. This example requests snapshot pricing, valuation metrics, analyst price targets, and recent SEC filing information. I'm using Apple again, so we can compare everything for the same company. Now, Claude retrieves the company information and begins organizing it. At the top, we have the basic snapshot. Then it gives us a valuation and profitability table, so we can quickly inspect metrics such as PE ratios, price to book, price to sales, margins, return metrics, debt-related information, and other fundamental data. Then we get the analyst view. Claude can organize the number of buy, hold, and sell ratings and show the available price targets. This doesn't mean analysts are going to be correct, but it's another useful data point we can add to the research. And further down, we can also see recent filing information. So now think about what we've already done inside one Claude session. Now I'm going to take it further and set this up specifically for Claude Code. Scroll down to the Ready-Made Workflows section. Here we have workflows designed specifically for Claude Code, and this gives us something even better than manually writing the same market analysis prompts again and again. We can install a plugin containing predefined TradingView commands. Here are some of the available commands. There are workflows for setup, market structure, swing analysis, momentum, options, levels, Confluence, quick chart analysis, and several other tasks. So I'm going to install this plugin into Claude Code. First, copy the plugin. Now open Claude Code. From the main Claude Code screen, go down to the prompt area and click the plus icon. From this menu, select Add Plugins. This opens the Claude Code directory. On the left side, select Plugins. Here you can see Claude's existing plugin directory, including Anthropic plugins and any custom marketplaces that you've added. Now click the plus icon in the upper right corner of the Plugins directory. This opens Add Marketplace. Claude asks us for a GitHub owner/repository or Git repository URL. For this marketplace, use the repository from the first command. Paste TV remix/cloud-plugin into the marketplace field, then click Sync. Claude Code will now connect to the repository and import the available plugin marketplace. Give it a few seconds to synchronize. Once the plugin is installed, return to Claude Code and open the / commands. And now you can see the new TradingView workflows available directly inside Claude Code. Now when I open the command menu, you can see all of these new TradingView-related commands. We have commands for things like charts, Confluence, levels, momentum, options, setup, swing analysis, and more. I'm going to start with Confluence because I want Claude to compare multiple timeframes and tell me whether the indicators and structure are actually aligned. One important thing here, the command still needs a valid symbol. If I run the command without giving Claude the ticker, it doesn't know which market I'm asking it to analyze. The plugin documentation also shows what each workflow does. For the Confluence workflow, it resolves the symbol, gathers multiple timeframes, evaluates technical direction, compares structure, and then builds an alignment or confluence score. So now I'll run it correctly. I'm going to use slash TV remix AAPL and send it. Claude now starts loading the skill references, resolves Apple to the correct exchange symbol, and begins pulling the multi-timeframe market data. Here is the Confluence report for Apple. This is much more useful than a simple buy or sell answer. Claude has created a scorecard with multiple timeframes. For each timeframe, it's comparing the trend, RSI, MACD, available market structure, and then assigning a verdict. So we can immediately see where the timeframes agree and where they conflict. Then, Claude creates an alignment score. And the interesting thing here is that it doesn't force a trade when the data is mixed. If shorter timeframes are bearish while higher timeframes are holding up, Claude describes that conflict. If momentum is weak, but the price is moving into an important structural area, it tells us that as well. Then we get the section called What to Do. I would not treat this as an automatic trading instruction. I would treat it as a checklist of conditions that would need to change before the setup becomes more convincing. For example, Claude can identify which price area would strengthen the bullish case, which breakdown would weaken it, and which time frame needs to confirm the move. Now let's run exactly the same workflow on another stock and see whether it produces a completely different analysis. This time, I'm going to run Meta. Claude resolves the symbol to Meta platforms and gathers the same multi-timeframe information. And notice that it doesn't just recycle the Apple analysis. The result is completely different. For Meta, Claude identifies a much weaker directional setup and describes it as a lower conviction area or transitional area. Again, we get the scorecard. We can compare the 15-minute, 1 hour, 4 hour, daily, and weekly views. Claude analyzes trend direction, RSI, MACD, and available structural information. Then it explains where the disagreement is. For example, price may be sitting in a broader discount area, while some of the intermediate timeframes are still showing bearish structure. This is exactly why multi-timeframe analysis matters. Now, I don't want to blindly trust the text, so I'm going to open TradingView itself and visually verify what Claude is describing. Here is the Meta chart. I'm changing to the same time frame used in the analysis. Claude has identified important structural areas, so I'm marking those zones directly on TradingView. We can see the upper area where previous price action created resistance and the lower area where price has previously reacted. And when we compare this with Claude's output, the general structural picture makes sense. Price is between those major zones, and the shorter-term action is not giving us a clean directional confirmation yet. This is the workflow I would actually use. Claude performs the heavy data analysis first, and then I verify the important levels visually on TradingView. That is much safer than blindly taking whatever an AI model outputs. Let's test one more ready-made command. This time, I'm going to use the chart workflow. I'll enter /TV remix AAPL 90 days. So instead of asking for a broad Confluence report, I'm specifically asking Claude to analyze Apple's chart over a 90-day look-back. Once I send the command, Claude already has the required skill references and the symbol information. It starts retrieving the relevant market data and indicators for that 90-day period. This command is useful when you want a much faster overview of one specific chart. Rather than manually calculating the moving averages, checking recent highs and lows, looking for major support and resistance, and then writing down the market structure yourself, The workflow can assemble those pieces automatically. Let's wait for it to finish the analysis. And here is the 90-day Apple chart analysis. Claude starts with the current snapshot and then compares the stock with its average activity over the requested period. Next, it summarizes the 90-day price action. So instead of only giving us today's movement, it tells us how the current price fits inside the broader move. Then we get the trend analysis. Claude checks where price sits relative to important moving averages and whether those averages support a trending or sideways interpretation. And then we get one of the most useful parts: levels. Claude identifies the important resistance area, major support areas, and the nearby zones that could matter if price moves in either direction. Then it adds indicators such as RSI, momentum, MACD, and volatility-related readings to show whether those levels are being approached with strong or weak confirmation. So now, with one command, I have a 90-day chart summary, trend context, moving average positioning, momentum information, and the major levels I would want to check manually on TradingView. The key is not to allow AI to make the final trading decision for you. The real advantage is using Claude Code as a research and analysis engine. Instead of spending 15 or 20 minutes manually collecting technicals, fundamentals, news, macro events, market structure, and multiple timeframes, we can compress much of that workflow into a few commands and then spend our time verifying the information that actually matters. And that's how you can combine Claude Code with TradingView data to build a much faster AI-powered market research workflow. Instead of manually jumping between charts, indicators, news, fundamentals, and multiple timeframes, Claude can help bring all of that information together, organize it, and make the research process much easier to understand. But remember, AI should support your analysis, not replace your own verification and risk management. If you want more practical workflows like this using Claude, AI tools, investing, and financial automation, subscribe to Pro AI Finances. And comment below which AI plus finance workflow you want me to test next. Learn AI, understand finance, work smarter.